We received very stunning news this week of the Pope's decision to resign his office as the Bishop of Rome, succeeding in the chair of Peter. And it comes as a real surprise, I think, to the whole world. And it says at the end of this month, February 28th, at exactly 8 p.m., the Pope is going to resign his job. It seemed to me that it was a real example of German precision. It's going to be exactly at this time. I was a student in Rome and got to travel some in Europe, and remember very clearly going to Germany, and there was kind of this very distinct cultural difference between Italy and Germany. And we got to, anyway, I was at the train, one of the train stations in Germany. I don't know where I was or where I was going exactly, but I distinctly recall a German train conductor who was very upset. I don't know what he was saying, but I got the message. He was angry at these people who were kind of dawdling on the train platform, and the train was going to leave, and he was looking at that clock, and he was looking at his watch and yelling at them, "This train is about to go," something like that anyway. And precisely 2:17, that train started moving out, and whether those people were on or not, they weren't waiting for them. Well, at precisely 8 p.m., the papal train will leave and end up in Ratzingerville. Well, I think he gave us a tremendous example there, a tremendous example of letting go in a person's life. The Pope has been a man very faithful to tradition, a man that held up tradition and honors tradition and loves tradition and believes that tradition is something that in many ways we haven't respected enough within the church, and that tradition has always given us a great deal of order and certainty and direction about our lives, that we can rely on the people from the past and the long experience of the church to guide us in the present moment as to how to deal with the varying and difficult situations that the church encounters. Yet, I think at this moment he said, or teaches us, that tradition serves a purpose. That the purpose is the good order of the church. And when that's no longer true, then the tradition needs to be set aside. The tradition doesn't have to be followed in that critical time. The tradition has a purpose. Now, in this case, I'm thinking of, there's kind of two different traditions in the church: the tradition of custom and practice and the way we have done things, and then the tradition of teaching, or the constant teaching that the church has held. This he doesn't set aside, but he does set aside this constant tradition because it's not for the good order of the church. And there was a good reason that the church had this tradition for a long time. Probably number one was that they didn't want to have varying pressure groups trying to push the Pope push out a Pope for their own purposes. And then it subjected the church to some division, maybe some political pressures. Probably the bigger reason is that they don't want to have the confusion existing of two popes existing at the same time. They don't want to have two leaders within the church. And the church has suffered scandalously on many occasions the reality of two different popes. And it was very hard to say who exactly is the real pope and who is the false one. They had listed the popes and the anti-popes, because there were times when different groups of cardinals met together and elected a different person to succeed the Pope. And so it was very unclear that at one point, to the great schism in the 14th century, there were three people claiming to be Pope, and it wasn't so clear to much of the church who exactly is the Pope. And so this could be a tremendous division and scandal, and so that we certainly don't want that kind of situation returning in the church. But the Pope, I think, recognized that that's not really much of a threat today, and he saw some more important values, namely what he said, that his own strength and energy was no longer really up to the task. And this is why he decided to resign, to set aside that office for somebody else to come forward. I know there's speculations that it was done for some other reason, that maybe he is sicker than he is led on to be. But that doesn't really convince me very much. I mean, lots of popes have been very sick. In fact, most of them have died in office. Obviously, they were pretty sick at some point. That did motivate them to give up their office. Famously, John Paul II, before him, was clearly very ill, but he didn't judge it to be the right thing to do in his case. Others have said, no, there's some hidden scandal that's about to come out that the Pope either maybe is personally involved in or that he doesn't want to face. But that doesn't really ring true either, does it? After all, the Pope has faced a lot of scandals. He's faced a lot of heartache. And if he was trying to avoid it, he could have avoided it. Well, he could never have taken the job. And he knew that there was going to be a great deal of anxiety and stress that came along with it. So that's not very convincing to me either. I really think it's just what he said. That he says, you know, this job demands a great deal of energy and commitment and strength on the part of the leader, and he says, I'm just not up to the task, and the church deserves something more. And so he's going to resign that office, and I hope that he lives a long life and can enjoy his time now in retirement, just as he says he wants to do. He's going to move apparently into a convent on the grounds there, and some cloistered sisters that are there. He's going to spend time in prayer and meditation, spend time reading and study, and maybe writing some books. I hope he doesn't end up watching Jeopardy at 10 a.m. Sister Magdalena, Jeopardy's about to be on. I showed it last week when they had popes who resigned as a category. If he, of course, if he wants to, he can join me on golf on Tuesday mornings if he'd like to play. I have to ask Frank Vitro if he minds taking on a third. Some people are kind of particular about that. We could always get some good German food at Metzler's afterwards if he'd like to do that. Well, I hope that it's a time that he can enjoy it, and, you know, I think a great symbol. You got to know when to quit. You got to know when to stop. You got to know when to let go of things. The New York Times had an interesting discussion, and they kind of teamed off from what the Pope decided to do. They wrote some articles saying, when do you decide to, let me see if I can find it. When do you decide to quit living alone? When do you decide to quit a job? When do you decide to quit dieting? When do you decide to quit working? When do you decide to quit driving? When do you decide to quit therapy? And I suppose you could make a whole long list of things when to decide these things. Once we get started on something, it's very hard to know when has the end come. But I think the Pope gave us a tremendous example. He did it not for his own benefit, because for himself he could have kept going and enjoyed some of the sense of power that comes for it. But he said, for the good of other people, I'm going to decide to let go of this so that others can benefit. Not for his own good, I think primarily, but for the good of others. Yes, he would benefit. So in letting go and in deciding to quit, there are some things that we need to decide to quit in our life that we have spent enough time and energy doing that maybe it's time to let it go and let God have a different way. I recognize that it could be abused, that people could say, well, I'm going to quit on my marriage. I've tried for a number of years and I just give up on this married life. I know that there are times when marriages come to an end and it's always a sad thing and a bad thing, but unfortunately sometimes staying together may be worse than separating. But that shouldn't, that's not exactly what I have in mind, or even maybe the idea that I'm going to give up on my church, I don't get anything out of this, or whatever other reasons may exist there. Maybe it's time to let go of some ideas, our ideas of the way things should be, our ambitions. Let go of what we think how life is supposed to be arranged, and let God have the direction in our life. Maybe it's our plans that are the problem, and that we need to let go of them. Let go and let God, I think, is a tremendous saying that is commonly used. We need to let go of our own selfish ends, or let go of things that just aren't working for us anymore, and let God be the one to decide what is the right thing to do. The Pope, I think, was able to let go because he saw the example of Jesus himself. It's Jesus who gives the tremendous example of letting go. In the desert today, he is tempted by Satan again and again to use his power for himself. He's tempted to use his ability to protect himself, to feed himself, to gain power, to gain glory from other people. And again he says, no, that is not my ambition. No, I'm not going to take this for myself. I let go of that and put everything into God.